Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, my name is Dr. Himanshu Tyagi and I am teaching this course on heat and mass transfer. Today we will start a new topic which is on radiative heat transfer. Before we do that, let us go to the slide and try and see what we have done in our previous lecture, which was the last part of the heat exchanger. So, we have looked at the epsilon NTU method, where epsilon stands for the effectiveness. So, we have started off with the most basic definition for effectiveness, which for the heat exchanger we can write in this form, that the heat transfer rate Q dot actual of the heat exchanger divided by Q dot max, where this delta T max we have defined in such a way that we have figured out what is the maximum temperature difference inside the heat exchanger. So, that happens to be in our set of examples that I have taken over here, the temperature difference between the hottest and the coldest inlets of the fluid. So, in this case we had taken the hot oil entering at 90 degree and hot and cold water entering at 10 degrees. So, we can immediately see that is the maximum temperature that difference that is possible. With that concept in mind, then we defined this symbol capital C, which is the product of mass flow rate and Cp, specific heat, and this capital C is called the heat capacity rate. So, we have two capital C's, capital CH and capital CC. So, what we want to figure out is this critical value, that which of these two C's has the minimum value. So, because what we are going to do is multiply the minimum C, minimum capital C with the maximum delta T, that will give us the Q dot max, and that will be the denominator, as we can see over here, that will be the denominator in the epsilon equation. So, in some cases we have the value of Q dot actual, we can calculate effectiveness and figure out what is the value of NTU. So, we did that exercise for deriving the expression for the effectiveness, and we took the first case for the parallel flow heat exchanger. So, all we wrote were these three equations, which are essentially different forms of energy balance equation, and we solved for epsilon value over here. So, I can highlight it with orange color, that this epsilon value is true for all type of parallel flow heat exchangers. We also defined the NTU expression like this, which is again UAS divided by C min, and we defined another capacity ratio called CR. So, it is a small CR, which is the ratio of C min to C max. So, I think we defined couple of parameters, but things were not very complicated, they were very interesting, and we could figure out some solved examples as well based on these expressions. So, after looking at the parallel flow expression, we looked at the counter flow over here, and we could come up with very interesting concepts like those special cases where CR value would tend to be 0. So, you remember CR is the ratio of C min to C max. So, this would be 0 only when C max tends to infinity, and the heat capacity rate of particular thing would tend to be infinity only when phase change is taking place, either it is going from liquid to vapor or vapor to liquid. Essentially, all that is happening at a very narrow temperature range. So, we looked at certain examples over here. So, I think what we did, as is seen over here, we took one solved example which we had previously solved using the LMTD method, and we knew the two temperatures of the inlet fluid, we knew the overall heat transfer coefficient, and the objective here was to calculate the value of AS, the overall effective area of the heat exchanger. So, I think if I remember correctly, with the LMTD method, that value had turned out to be about 23.5 meter square. Then last time we did the same calculation, but we did it with the epsilon NTU method, and over here we had figured out that epsilon value, once we calculated as 88%, we have to either use in order to calculate NTU, either we use one of the figures which was given earlier over here. Let me go back a little bit. Yeah. So, that is where we were over here, and we figured out based on the value of CR and epsilon. So, one value was 88% for effectiveness and CR value was 0.38. So, we could pick this dot over here, which gave us an NTU of approximately 3, and that value we plugged in over here. So, this is an approximate value we used for NTU, and we got an approximate value for area. It is about 25, which is pretty close to this value. We could have also used the exact value which we can get by solving the equation, and which we did briefly, and that exact value turned out to be 2.76 for NTU, and based on that the area was 23 meters square. So, I am just doing a recap of explaining the overall concept of the heat transfer, heat exchanger design and calculation. So, we can either use LMTD in certain cases we can use epsilon NTU method. With that, we wrapped up that particular section of our discussion, and today we are going to start a new topic which is very exciting, and this is because radiation was the third mode of heat transfer which we are going to start today, and already two modes we have looked at in lot of detail. So, first we started off with conduction. I think about 10 to 12 lectures we have done on that. Then we went on and looked at convection, and I think several set of lectures we did on convection as well, both forced convection, natural convection. Then we looked at applications of convection, which is heat exchanger. So, today we are going to start a new topic which is about fundamentals of radiation. We will like to see that if even no medium is present, if there is no contact, then there can't be conduction. If there is contact, but the fluid medium is moving, then we can have convection. So, we do not have either of those, maybe it is just vacuum surrounding that particular body. Even then heat transfer takes place, that is the beauty of nature. And let us start with the very basics. So, one or two simple examples I will illustrate, which will help us understand what type of problems that we are going to look at in the next few set of lectures. And then I am going to go into the details of the fundamentals of radiation and try and see what are the governing equations behind it. And I will also start off with lot of examples that we face all around us, including in this room, that of radiation heat transfer. So, let us start off with some typical example, and these are the type of questions that we are going to be solving when we are looking at radiative heat transfer. So, one of the simplest question in radiative heat transfer is, if let us say I have a sphere of known radius, and this radius value I know. So, R naught let us say is about 4 centimeter, and I will explain the concept behind it is, if I can put it on the camera, I was thinking that if we have an object that we can hold in our hand, it is very small. So, the effective diameter I measured is about 8 centimeter. So, I can assume that this cup, instead of being cylindrical, if it is spherical and it is at the same temperature as the room and my body itself, I would like to estimate how much heat is it losing through radiation, just to illustrate a small point. So, I am assuming that instead of it being a cup, it is actually a sphere which is at a certain temperature. So, its surface temperature I am just assuming a round figure around 300 Kelvin, which I can write also as 27 degree centigrade. So, these are temperatures that we deal with in real life all the time. So, I can show that it is going to lose energy by radiation, and I am assuming that this cup or this particular sphere is kept in isolation, which means there are no other bodies surrounding it. It is kept in vacuum. So, there is no way it can lose heat through conduction or through convection. There are nothing which is surrounding it. It is just put inside the universe, somewhere in the space. I have put this particular body, and we just want to estimate that with time its temperature will reduce. So, what is the value of Q dot radiation? So, I think some of you are already aware, and these are things that we are going to look into lot of detail in this particular set of lectures. So, do not worry even if you are not familiar with this equation, but I believe lot of students already are, and I think we all remember from our school days that radiation goes approximately as T to the power 4. That is why we have to put everything in Kelvin. So, we in this set of lectures we will never talk in degree centigrade, everything we will do is in Kelvin. So, all the temperatures should be in Kelvin. So, let us see these equations without knowing much of these things. Let me put in some values over here. So, whatever this epsilon is, we will figure out very soon that this is emissivity, I am taking it as 1. This is a sigma, which I am going to assume is a constant, and I know its value as well. So, let us say this is AS value I can figure out because I know the radius over here. So, if I know the radius r naught, then I can calculate the area of the sphere 4 pi r naught square. If I have a calculator, I can do that very quickly, which I did already beforehand. So, for your help, I am just writing that round off value over here. So, AS turns out to be 0.02 meter square, and TS value also I know is 300 Kelvin. So, this is simply a very simple equation. I can plug in all these values, and if I have a calculator around me, a scientific calculator where I can calculate t to the power 4 very easily, I get some value very close to this. So, what I am trying to say is, if I take this cup or a sphere of this particular size, take it in vacuum, this thing I am assuming is about 8 centimeters in diameter, I am assuming it is spherical. So, the rate at which it is going to lose heat energy is 9 watts, and then depending on its specific heat, we can figure out how quickly will its temperature actually change. So, what does this 9 watt value tell us? Let us play around with these numbers a little bit. Let us say that for 300 Kelvin we have figured it out. Let us try and increase the temperature in some range, let us say. So, what I am going to do is I am going to make a table over here. So, I am just playing around with these numbers for the benefit of students, so that they get some picture about what is actually going on over here. So, the first case I have done is for 300 Kelvin, and the amount of radiative heat loss in terms of watts is about 9 watts. What if it was at higher temperature? So, because the radiation losses vary as t to the power 4, we will expect that it should increase much faster. So, let me just create that table. So, if this temperature is about 400 Kelvin, which is roughly, I can put some centigrade numbers over here as well, 127 degrees centigrade. So, much higher than the steam temperature at 1 atmospheric. So, I get somewhere about 28 watts. Let me increase it by another 100. So, this is I think 227 degrees, then it goes to 69 watts. So, we are seeing substantial increase in the rate of radiative heat loss. Now, let us go to really high numbers. What if its temperature was 1000 Kelvin? And it turns out that number starts to become quite big now. So, we are looking at 1100 watts. So, that is almost like 1 kilowatt radiative heater. So, just imagine this small sphere at that temperature loses about 1 kilowatt of heat. Now, let us go at some really ridiculously high temperature. Let us say we are giving the sun temperature to that particular sphere. So, sun temperature effectively we can take as a black body temperature around 6000 Kelvin, and in the next few slides I will talk about the radiation from sun as well. So, just for now, just go along with me. So, we are giving it 6000 Kelvin, and I think over here the number becomes very high. So, I am going to use megawatts now. So, it turns out to be 1.4 megawatt. I am going to write it again. So, it turns out 1.4 megawatt, and that is huge, which means if I am going to sustain that amount of heat loss, I have to supply power to it in order to keep its temperature same. If I am supplying electric current or some chemical reaction or combustion is taking place inside it, just like how it is taking place inside the sun. So, we can figure out huge amount of energy per second is required. So, 1.4 megajoules needs to be consumed through electrical heating, through chemical reaction in order to obtain this number. Lastly, one last number I wanted to pick was, if let us say we gave it a colder temperature, much colder than the room temperature, let us say minus 10 degrees centigrade. So, I converted it into Kelvin. So, we get 263 Kelvin. Over there we will get something less than 9, right, because now we are going in other direction. So, if my calculation is correct, So, it turns out to be about 5.3 watt, which is really a small number over here. These exercise, why am I doing? Just to share some numbers, to students can get feel of some numbers in case of radiation heat transfer, and also to illustrate what type of problems we will start with. This is a very simple problem, we will just go through it very quickly. Later on, we will move on to more complicated problems, which means instead of that cup being there, now making the radiative problem slightly tougher. If I have very huge two plates, so this plate is very large, so it is large in this direction, and this direction as well. It's very large. Then I have another very large plate which is kept facing it. So, these are very large plates. So, I am putting infinity on all sides because they are huge. So, I am putting two very large plates facing one another. So, there is some gap in between. So, I can show that gap as the distance is d, and what I am going to do is give them different temperatures. So, here plate 1 I am giving a higher temperature. So, I am maintaining it at T1, plate 2 I am maintaining at temperature T2 in such a way that T1 is greater than T2, and later on we will define some parameters which I have not defined today, but I am just putting it around. So, I will call the emissivity for plate 1 as epsilon 1, emissivity for plate 2 as epsilon 2, because T1 is greater than T2, some net heat transfer will take place from plate 1 to plate 2, net rate of heat transfer, and since it is taking place from 1 to 2, let me write it in this way. So, this is only because of radiation, because again everything else around it is, I put all these things in space. So, I put both the plates in space. So, do not ask me how I am going to do that, it is difficult, but as a thought experiment we can imagine that these two plates are there in space, there is nothing around them, it is total vacuum, and our task is as heat transfer engineers to figure out the value of q dot 12. So, again I am jumping a little bit ahead just to give you a flavor of what we are going to do over here. So, we are going to do some lengthy exercise at the end of which some value we will get. So, again it will be related to T to the power 4, and because T1 is greater than T2. So, it will have T1 power 4 minus T to the power 4. So, I will get a positive quantity over here, and I will get expression something like this. I think there is a minus here. So, the question will be that how do we obtain expressions like this. So, this is what we will learn in this particular course. Things like what is the definition of emissivity, why do different materials have different emissivities. If I keep two different materials or even three different materials, I would even later on create the problem in such a way that there could be three different surfaces. So, red surface, blue surface and the green surface over here. This is at temperature T1, this is at T2, this is at T3, and there is lot of gaps and space in between, like you can see there is some gap over here, some gap over here and gap over here. So, we may want to figure out that between these three surfaces how much is the rate of heat transfer from one to another, from second to third, from third to first, and what is the overall rate of heat transfer, who is giving the heat, who are the which are the surfaces which are consuming the heat. Then how do I convert all these surface, which is the theoretical analysis, into a real furnace. So, what we may imagine is I could have a rectangular cross sectional furnace. So, this is a cross section of that furnace. It could be electrical in nature. So, one side could have some electrical heating over here. So, generally metallurgist and material science people use furnace in order to put their samples, take it to high temperature. They are interested in the rate at which temperature changes, how high the temperature goes, for how much long they put that particular thing over there. So, the furnace is something like we all have an oven in our home. What we do with food over there, the metallurgy people do it with metals and composites and all sort of different type of materials in order to study its physical characteristic, measure it. They can even make it go through some fatigue cycle. So, it can be some thermal fatigue, several cycles of heating and cooling and heating and cooling. So, the material properties deteriorate over there. So, if a furnace is there, which is having some temperature on this side, some temperature on this side, then refractory surface over here, which means very highly polished like a glass surface on this side 3, and then heat supply on this side over here, because in furnace you have to supply heat. So, we will be able to figure out that predominantly radiation heat transfer takes place between these 4 surfaces. How much heat do we need to provide, how much insulation we need to keep, what is the temperature of each of these surface going to be, which means I will just start off with a very simple example like a single sphere kept in space with nothing around it, and then we will build on the complexity more and more. We will bring 2 surfaces together, then 3 and then 4. Then we will start playing around with their material properties like emissivity, how it varies between surface 1, 2 and 3. It will even be a function of lambda, it can be a function of temperature. Then we will talk about associated properties like absorptivity, reflectivity, transmissivity. Like I may ask a question that all solids are not opaque. In this room, I have this cup over here which is opaque, but I am also wearing glasses. So, by definition the glasses are some things which are solid, but they have to be transparent in the visible spectrum. So, we will start asking those questions, what is the visible spectrum, how is it that certain material are transparent, but this cup, this mobile phone over here, the cloth that I am wearing, my own skin, it is not transparent. So, we will look into more and more details that what is the reflectivity of each of these materials. So, these are the kind of things that we will study. That is why I feel it is very exciting topic, and we will devote several lectures on this particular concept. With that, let us go in nature and try and see some examples of thermal radiation. So, let us see thermal radiation as is defined at several places. So, I will define it very formally later on, that what exactly is wavelength, what is the electromagnetic wave. Over here just remember this concept that thermal radiations are those electromagnetic wave having the wavelength between 0.1 micron and 100 micron. And just to give a comparison over here, maybe I will write over here that the visible spectrum is somewhere between 0.4 micron to 0.7 micron. So, we can see the thermal radiation spectrum, it actually covers the visible spectrum as well. So, let us look at thermal radiation spectrum in the nature that people have been observing not only for the last 100, 200 years, but several thousands or even tens of thousands of years. So, one of the best examples is of course, the sun, as we can see over here. So, huge amount of spectrum is coming from the sun, radiation is coming from the sun. What else have human beings been used to? So, if there is a fire, then not only visible light, but heat also is emitted. So, when scientists measure, they figure out that lot of thermal radiation is coming from this particular fire as well. What are other examples? People have been looking at volcanoes for long periods of time at those zones which are having active volcanoes. So, this is one of the photographs which is taken, and not only when volcano is active, even when some sort of lava is coming out from there, then just imagine that this is molten rock at such high temperature that it is giving out huge amount of emissions. So, these are thermal emissions which are visible to us because they are in this particular spectrum over here. Like I have mentioned, I will highlight it with the red color over here. So, this is the visible spectrum, and we can see over here in all these cases that the temperature must be so high. This is something we will figure out very soon, that those thermal radiations are visible to us as well. Now, if I ask the students a question that in this room there is no fire, so does it mean there is no visible, if I switch off all the lights, then probably it will be dark, there is nothing like a heat source over here, but are there other objects over here which will be giving out thermal radiation? So, the answer is yes, any object which has a finite temperature, it emits radiation. So, we will start and look at the reason behind that as well. So, even from my body, which is perhaps at 25 degrees centigrade, or I convert it into Kelvin. So, my body is at about 300 Kelvin approximately. So, I will put an approximate sign over here. So, 300 Kelvin, we will figure out, we can even calculate based on some equations that in what wavelength am I will my body be emitting the maximum at which wavelength? And that is very important, because like is shown in the next figure over here. So, this is an IR image. So, like there is a camera in front of me which is recording this particular lecture, which is why the students are able to see. So, this camera in front of me operates in the visible spectrum. So, it is recording everything. I am standing in front of this green screen over here. So, all the lights which are present over here, their purpose is to reflect from my body, from the screen, so that my gesturing and whatever I am writing on the screen gets captured by that camera digitally, and then it is transmitted in various form. Now, there are different type of cameras as well, which actually capture image in the IR region. So, we will very soon look at what is the visible spectrum, what is IR, what is UV. And in that case, if a body is at 300 Kelvin, like this person whose image is shown over here, then we will be able to do calculation and write something like that for this body over here. If it is at 300 Kelvin, then its peak wavelength at which emission is taking place is perhaps very close to 10 microns. By the way, I have not defined wavelength, frequency, speed of light yet, but I just want to give some feel, because students sometimes have some background information, but this is images also capture very nicely all the applications of radiative heat transfer and many more that we will come at very soon. So, I hope with these images, I think that concept is becoming clear. Okay. Now, let me go to the next slide, which is also very interesting. So, if you see over here, so this is the same sun we have seen earlier, and every day we see it around us. So, this image is taken from one of the references, and it shows very nicely the temperature profile inside the sun. So, we all know fusion reaction is taking place inside the sun, nuclear fusion is taking place over there. So, at the core the temperatures are very, very high, but we will figure out a way in our radiative heat transfer chapter, is that even though those temperatures could be even millions of degree as given over here, and there are some million of degree even in the corona as well. So, there are some small areas in corona, but effective temperature for sun. So, we will learn these terms, that what does the effective black body temperature actually mean. So, scientists have figured out this number, that we can effectively say that sun is about 5800 Kelvin approximately, or even if we can round it off. So, we can say that the sun temperature, black body temperature, is effectively 6000 Kelvin. So, we have to be very careful, because in reality the sun core temperature is very high, like it is shown in this slide over here. In some places it could even be more than 10 million Kelvin, because in that is a huge nuclear fusion reactor furnace over there, and huge amount of heat is actually being produced, and that heat is traveling, the light is traveling, so very far distance. And if I can draw, I can't draw it on scale over here, but let us imagine if our planet Earth, maybe we call it the blue marble, the blue planet, because all images from space turn out to be of blue color because of the presence of water. So, I can write this is Earth over here. So, all that radiation energy actually goes in all directions, and very small amount of that radiation reaches the Earth over here, and that radiation is sustaining life on Earth. And one of the primitive form of life which has been around for several hundred million years is the plants. So, the plants are all usually having the green leaf. So, if I can draw over here the green leaf structure for a plant, my drawing is not very good, but I think we have all seen this one. So, eventually all these are able to harness the energy from the sun in the form of photosynthesis. So, this we have studied in our high school biology class, and then produce certain energy and biomass. So, in some ways if we look at it, plants and botanical organisms which are using the concept of photosynthesis, which is using the solar energy for conversion to biomass, are some of the world's best solar collectors. So, this is a very interesting concept, that whole life is actually sustained by radiative heat transfer, And this curve actually shows what I was talking about in the previous slide, that if you look at the actual measurement of the WMO spectrum, where WMO stands for this. And the nice thing is this measurement has been done extraterrestrially, which means if this is planet Earth, then there is a thin layer of atmosphere surrounding it. So, this measurement has been done outside the terrestrial region, maybe at this point over here or this point or this point. So, all this measurement has been done in the sun, because we will also see very soon that as soon as the sunlight enters the atmosphere over here, it starts to get absorbed, it starts to get scattered. So, some attenuation, extinction takes place. Some of it is because of cloud, some of it is because of very small particles, some of it is just because of all the gases which are present in the atmosphere: nitrogen, oxygen, CO2, H2O. Atmosphere not only participates in absorbing that solar radiation when it was coming, but also when it is actually re-emitted by the earth, because earth, once it absorbs that radiation, its temperature increases. So, it is again emitting. So, all objects, all materials which is having the finite temperature, it is going to emit. So, we will study all those laws. So, again when that emission is taking place, then it is being absorbed in the atmosphere, and this is one of the concepts of the greenhouse warming that we are hearing about in the news lately about climate change. So, coming back to this particular spectrum over here. So, this measurement which is shown in black line, and I can highlight it as red line over here. So, we will see very soon what is this black body spectrum which is drawn with the dotted line over here. So, maybe I will show it with the green line. So, this dotted line we can represent with green over here. So, what scientists have tried to do is kind of overlay the red and the green together, and there is a very good match between the theoretical. So, the green one is the theoretical curve. So, these are theoretical values for a given temperature. So, I think they have matched it at this temperature, yeah, 5800 Kelvin, and there is a very good match between these two values over here. That is why we usually take the black body effective temperature of sun as very close to 5800 Kelvin. Okay. Now, I have a question for the students, because I wanted to make some point related to radiative heat transfer, and one of the best examples is our solar system. So, you can see this is a very rough sketch of the solar system, not to scale, but we can see some of the planets over here. Mercury is the closest to the sun, then we have Venus, then our blue planet Earth, then Mars, and then the remaining planets over here. So, the question I have put on the title: what do the students expect is the average surface temperature of each planet? So, I am not asking you to answer from memory, but I think there is a trend you will observe that Mercury, it is the closest, it should have the highest temperature, and as we go further away from the sun, because the amount of irradiation, that heat flux should be reducing as 1 by r square of distance. So, when r increases, then the temperature we expect should actually reduce. So, let us look at those values. So, Mercury, so this is the average surface temperature. There could be some diurnal variations between day and night. So, let us see some average numbers over here. So, Mercury is about 167 degree centigrade. Venus, let us skip for the time being. Then Earth, we are living here. So, we can expect, yeah, between summer and winter, I think this is a good number, 20 degree. Then Mars should be much colder, and we see this is minus 67. So, we see some sort of a trend that 167 is highest. Then we go over here, and if Mercury Venus value is missing over here, then as students, if we have to guess, the Venus temperature is between the Mercury temperature and the Earth temperature. So, we may expect it could be about 110, 120, maybe 130. Now, let us look at the actual temperature. So, just see that number turns out to be 464 degrees centigrade. Venus is even hotter than Mercury. I am sorry, I misspoke. Venus, even though it is further away from the sun, its temperature there is higher than that of Mercury. So, we may not be able to explain it exactly in the few lectures how it is happening. So, I encourage students to look it up themselves, but they are a very interesting concept of participative media, that if there is a dense atmosphere someplace, maybe greenhouse effect could be taking place, or there could be two surfaces which are put in this room under that bulb which is giving out light, and one could have high absorptivity, one could have low absorptivity. So, even at same distance their temperatures could be different. So, I am just put this to illustrate one or two of those particular points, that we have to be very curious and see that radiative heat transfer could be taking place in many places around us. So, one way of looking at is to explain the phenomena which is taking place. The other way is from the design point of view, that I want to achieve in my furnace those particular temperatures at this heat flux, this size. Now, as a heat transfer engineer, I could be hired by a consulting company, that can you use your knowledge to figure out which materials, which amount of flux that I need to do. So, I need to be able to know all those equations and understand the basic concepts behind it. So, we will look at concepts like spectral blackbody emissive power and blackbody function, but these will come little bit ahead. Now, let us go into the fundamentals. So, this is what an overview I wanted to provide with some interesting examples, some motivation behind it. Now, let me go into some equations and explain many of the terms that we have looked at earlier. So, let us start with some equation for waves, and in particular we will look at electromagnetic waves. So, in general we can see the speed of a particular wave which is travelling can be related to its frequency and wavelength, and I remember in our time it used to be taught in school. So, I am going to assume all students are aware about it. So, I will just write this is electromagnetic wave. So, just for explanation, this is the speed of wave generally given in meters per second. This is the frequency generally given in hertz, or I can also write it as second inverse, and this is the wavelength. And generally given in meters. So, the wave I am talking about, in a simple case I can show it as a sine wave. If it is not moving anywhere, it will be a stationary wave. If I simply write y is equals to sine x, or I can have different wave just shifted by 90 degree over here, it becomes y is equals to cos x. Okay. Can you see that these two waves are shifted by 90 degree, and I think I can show it with the help of different color over here. So, if I put my axis over here, then this sine becomes cos. So, there is just a 90 degree phase difference between sine and cos. So, they are not really different functions. So, they are just ahead or back by 90 degree between one another. But this we remember from our trigonometry and geometry, this is actually a stationary curve. It is actually mathematical, it is not moving anywhere, but a wave is actually moving, which means there has to be a component with time. So, again I remember these things are usually covered in school. I am doing here just for the concept for recap. So, I can make it move over here. So, then if I put a time component as well, so I can say I first put the wavelength A naught over here, then I can say maybe I will write little bit on the left side. So, this purple wave I can say y equals to A naught, which is the amplitude sine k x minus omega t. Now, we can see this wave is actually moving, is not it? And it depends on two values k and omega, which means after some time this wave is going to be over here. So, I think that is what I remember. If I put a minus sign over here, then it means it is going in the positive direction, but please double check that point as well. I may have made a mistake, but I am kind of sure. So, this wave is travelling in this direction with some velocity c. So, this c is the velocity. What it means over here, if I make omega 0, then what happens? Then this wave becomes stationary like this. So, these two are stationary waves, okay? And this is a moving wave over here. Now, I should have defined earlier that this is the wavelength of the wave lambda, and this is the amplitude over here. So, when I am writing y equals to sine x, I am assuming there is a 1 over here. So, the amplitude is simply 1. But if I want to change it, or if I want to give different units, then I can put a naught or a E naught for electric field or H naught for magnetic field. That will come to in a little while. So, lambda we can figure out. is the wavelength defined in green over here. Frequency is also known, that how many times something oscillates. So, if I can oscillate my finger over here, if I do it slowly, then I can say the frequency is 1 every second. So, I do it once, then twice, then thrice. But if I do it 5 times faster, so it is going to be 5 cycles per second, so 5 hertz. So, I think these are things we also know from our earlier experience, but let me just go ahead and write the definition for k and omega over here. So, k is related to wavelength and omega is related to frequency. Now, we have written k and omega in these formats. I will write it in new color. This is and this is so. Our lambda and nu are already defined over here, which means if I substitute these values, I should be able to get something, isn't it? Which means if I am correct, then it will turn out to be C can also be written like this. Okay? Or I can write it in a traditional format. I can say that C is also lambda into nu. So, both these are actually equivalent, both these are okay. So, these are some basic concepts about the waves, and the same thing hold true for electromagnetic wave as well, because as the name suggests, we will see very soon there must be some electrical component, a magnetic component travelling together at the speed of light, that is the electromagnetic wave. Which means, we can jump ahead and define speed of light is frequency of the electromagnetic wave in vacuum. That is why we put a naught over here. So, if we are putting a naught, then we mean in vacuum. And this is a constant which scientists have observed, and various places have measured it, and it always turns out to be the same number. So, this is the value of C naught. So, this is what happens for case 1. So, case 1 I am doing experiments in vacuum, I am measuring the speed of light. So, there is some method which I have. So, I get the value C naught like this. Then later on I am more curious, I am not satisfied just in vacuum, I want to also do it somewhere in another medium. So, what are some mediums in which light or electromagnetic wave can travel? So, I can see all around even while wearing these glass. So, maybe glass is one medium in which electromagnetic wave can travel, air is another one, many of the liquids as well. What about solids? What about metals? Which means there could be some participative media in which the wavelength, the amplitude may actually reduce as it is travelling. So, I will give those examples later on, and this is one of the reasons why when sun is actually overhead, it appears whitish yellowish, but in the evening and very early in the morning, it kind of appears reddish, because the effective length that it has to travel through atmosphere is much more larger than during the noon, and it allows lot of attenuation scattering for the lower wavelength. The blue, violet, all those get scattered more, what remains appears as red. So, if let us say light or electromagnetic wave is travelling in a medium, then its speed becomes c such as it becomes less than c naught, and we can actually equate it with this equation over here, where n is defined as the index of refraction. Because it is an electromagnetic wave in vacuum, we can also define C naught in this way. This is kind of little bit advanced stuff, but I thought I will put it over here because it may interest students. So, epsilon and mu, do students remember, they have studied it somewhere in their high school physics, somewhere related to electric field, something related to magnetic field. So, their names will actually be self explanatory. So, this is the electrical permittivity and mu naught is the magnetic permeability. Now you remember. So, those product and taking inverse and square root, but these things have to be in vacuum. Why? Because wherever we put this knot over here, so this knot means it is in vacuum. Similarly, this knot as well and this knot over here as well. This is generally the convention that when we are looking at a radiative heat transfer, participative media, radiative transport equation. So, we generally in vacuum for all variables we put a knot over there. So, I think this is some basic concepts behind the waves. If we look where we have started from, so we looked at simple electromagnetic wave. We defined the speed of it, frequency, wavelength. With the help of some diagram on the right hand side, we looked at some stationary waves. So, let me write stationary over here. This is also stationary wave, and this third one over here is a moving wave, which is traveling either right or left. Then we looked at the value of the speed of light or the speed of electromagnetic wave in vacuum and also inside the medium, and those two are connected with one another with the ratio given by n. So, this thing over here is actually n. Now, let us look, because we are looking at the fundamentals, at this parameter over here. So, we are back on the previous slide, we are trying to look at wavelength, and this is a wavelength which is usually denoted because of ease of use for distinguishing between different type of electromagnetic waves. So, electromagnetic wave, how can they be different? So, we can have one electromagnetic over here. I can keep the frequency same, I can increase the amplitude. So, what we see is generally the type does not change. If one is red, I am increasing the intensity, I am making it more bright, it would still remain red. The other way I can do it is keep the original amplitude A, this becomes let us say 3A, I keep it still A, but I double the wavelength. So, I make it like this. An interesting thing is, because C naught is constant, okay, and let me call it case 1 over here. In case 1, my wavelength here is lambda 1, and here it is also same lambda 1, because only I have increased the amplitude. Here it has become big, so I will call it lambda 2. And it kind of looks like we are in this zone over here. So, it kind of looks like it is 3 times. So, lambda 2 is 3 times lambda 1, which means the inverse is true for its frequency. Frequency 2 is 1/3 the frequency of lambda 1. And why it is true? Because once we multiply lambda with frequency, we will get some value C, and this here also we will get the value same C over here. Okay. Now, let us look at any of these parameters, which means both lambda and nu are kind of connected. If C is constant, I can simply write C is nu lambda. So, lambda is simply some constant divided by nu, which means just for ease of use in our radiative heat transfer, we will make lambda as one of the variable properties. We can do the same thing with nu as well, but we just choose to use lambda. So, what I mean by that is, we will look at some things called the black body emissive power, and we will put a lambda over there. We will call something like emissivity, we can put a lambda over there. Then we can call something absorptivity, then lambda over there, transmissivity, lambda. In fact, even our refractive index varies with lambda. So, these things all will be known as, whatever things vary with lambda is known as a spectral. So, the word spectral will be used for that what is the spectral emissivity, what is the spectral absorptivity. what is the spectral black body emissive power, something like that. Now, let me formally define with this background about the spectrum. I will use the next slide. Let me draw on a big scale over here. So, let me vary spectrum on this particular scale over here. So, essentially what I am doing is I am varying wavelength. So, here the wavelength is low lambda, and here the wavelength is high lambda. Okay. So, I will start in somewhere in between and I will put a mark for 1 micron, then I will put it multiples of 10. So, it goes from 1 to 10 to 100, 1000, 10,000 and then 1 lakh. And I can keep on going over there, but let me go back over here, then 10 to the power minus 1, 10 to the power minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, minus 5, and the units for all of them, please remember, is microns. Now, we remember from our school days that our visible spectrum is somewhere between 0.4 to 0.7 micron. So, let me go ahead and draw that, and maybe I will use the same black color over here. So, somewhere over here 0.4 and 0.7. So, let me draw a block over here. So, this is my visible spectrum. Okay. So, this whole region that I have shaded over here is the visible spectrum, and which side of it. So, maybe I will formally define over here that the visible spectrum which the human eye can see. So, this visible we are always saying about human eye, because I will also share that later on. Lot of animals, reptiles and other organisms, they do not share our visible spectrum, they can see very well in another spectrum. So, believe it or not, there are certain reptiles which can actually see in this spectrum over here. So, they can see in the 10 micron spectrum, which is very bad for us, although they use it for sensing other prey, because 10 microns is that spectrum in which our bodies are actually emitting in the peak over there. So, let me erase this part. So, visible spectrum is 0.4 to 0.7, and 0.4 represent that violet part, and then we keep on increasing the wavelength and we reach the red part. So, we remember VIB GYOR. So, I can even color it over here, because I think there is a lot of colors which are available. Then we go to blue, VIB, green, yellow, I have to make dark, orange. So, we have the rainbow color on this slide as well, very nice. So, I can put the same thing over here, but I am not going to write all the colors. So, I will just put the extreme to violet and red. So, violet is on this side 4 microns, red is on that side, and green is somewhere in the middle over here. So, rest I think students can figure out on their own, and maybe I can put some numbers here as well. So, violet is roughly, so I will put a rough sign over here, approximately 0.4 micron. Green is similarly I think 0.5 micron, and red is roughly speaking 0.7 microns. Then once we increase the wavelength, we go on the right hand side over here. So, in this zone over here, then we again remember from our school days that it used to be called the infrared. So, this whole region over here is the infrared region, and in short form it is called as IR. I think it goes up to 10 to the power 4 over here. These are approximate values which are being used just to show the different zones. On the other hand, if we go at lower wavelengths, what will we get? So, I will maybe use the dark purple over here. So, in this zone over here, we will have the ultraviolet, and that will be short form as UV. We go even at shorter wavelength, which means another thing I will mention over here very quickly is that I can write another expression which I will discuss in detail later on, something like this. Let's see by lambda. So, what I am doing is using the relationship between wavelength and energy. So, as wavelength becomes less, we can clearly see energy is increasing. So, over here where we have low wavelength, I can write that this light has high energy, and where we have high wavelength, I can write this is low energy. Which means, if I go at higher energy than ultraviolet, what will I get? And these are things which many of us have seen in hospitals, because they are very good for medical diagnostics. So, these are known as the X-rays, and we can go even higher than that on this particular side. Then we will have gamma rays over here. So, one place where gamma rays are emitted is if there is a nuclear explosion. So, when some nuclear testing is taking place, then lot of gamma rays are emitted, and then over here at extreme high energy there will be cosmic rays, which is emitted. So, some stars or some other places, they are such high energy that even in normal nuclear action it is not taken place. Maybe at supernova collapse they are emitted. Then we go on the other side, very low energy. So, what does low energy mean? It is high wavelength. So, we go over there, high wavelength. So, we go, I think, in this part. So, we have microwave at our home. So, that name I think comes from this wave. So, this is the microwave over here. So, these are microwaves. Then we have broadcast of radio and other signals. So, all that is over here. So, that is radio plus TV waves. And the most interesting thing that our focus will be on is the thermal radiation. So, that is this zone in between. So, thermal radiation very interestingly rise in this particular zone over here. So, this is our for our interest. This is thermal radiation, and maybe I have a little bit time remaining. So, what I will do is I will just write the definition and then I will stop for today. So, thermal radiation are those radiation, these are those electromagnetic waves which are emitted solely due to its temperature, and this is 0.5 micron range up to 100 micron range. So, usually by this definition, this is what the number comes out to be, that is significantly it is over here. So, I think in the interest of time, because I think we are very close to the end of this particular lecture, let me stop over here. So, this was the first part of the radiative heat transfer lecture. I hope you enjoyed the introduction which I have prepared. Let me continue from this slide itself from the next lecture onward, and then we will start going into more and more detail. We will look at the physics behind things and look at the equations. Thank you very much. Thank you.